Welcome, everyone, to a special edition of Crime, Corrections, and Culture. We have a real treat for you today and an absolutely amazing guest and an amazing interview. You are really going to like this. Without further ado, let's just get to it. Today's guest, Mr. Valrice Cooper. When he was 17 years old, he was the youngest person ever sent to Angola prison, which was the bloodiest prison in the United States. He spent 35 years there, but while there became a boxing trainer, ultimately was released from prison and became the trainer of the great Roy Jones Jr. He's known as the cornerman. Valrice Cooper, welcome to the show and thank you for being here.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so first of all, how did you end up in prison for 35 years when you were 17 years old?
I was in high school at the time, and me and another classmate of mine had robbed another classmate of ours to of a Washington 22 out to go score some weed. But we didn't think it was something that going to uh put us in a position like we kept the presidents and stuff. We was just having fun and rob our classmate and took some money from our classmate and went stole some weed and came back to the high school dance. So we didn't we at that time our naive we didn't think it was a a great crime that we committed. We just thought we was doing some juvenile delinquent stuff to go get high.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, they were looking for us for armed robbery and and um and when they captured us for armed robbery, and we was charged with the armed robbery, my Paul partner was given 5 years and I was given 40 because I was deemed as the ringleader of the whole situation. So at that time, you giving a 17-year-old kid 40 years and you sending them to Angola, that was unheard of back then. It was unheard of. So when I got my sentence, it was outrageous to see that a 17-year-old kid get um 40 years on his first offense.
Jesus.
On his first offense. That's the first conviction I ever had in my life.
So you walk into Angola prison. Now, I tout this show as no hyperbole, no sensationalism. So the prisons that I've been in, and most of the prisons that I've heard about, where I have real information about, there's a lot of hype about how dangerous they are, but it really doesn't amount to much. Not that they're not dangerous at all; they're just not as dangerous as the inmates claim. But from what I understand, Angola really was very, very dangerous. So when you walk into that prison at 17, what is your initial emotional reaction and what is going through your mind?
Well, first of all, my anger, my it all started with the judge. First of all, let's
Okay.
back up. 'Cause
Okay.
my anger started with the judge. I think I was before a racist judge, and I think his whole purpose was to send me to Angola, where I would never survive it, or I would get brutalized or what. That was his intent. That was what's on his mind. And and the fact that he had that about me and decided to give me as much time to make sure what his purpose was succeed, I had developed a hatred and a rebellion that it had never happened. That when I get to Angola, that not only would I was gonna survive it, I was gonna be the worst 17-year-old Angola ever seen, and I succeed because the anger in me made me know that I knew I was messed over. I knew I was given a lot of time that the average 17-year-old than get. Can you imagine back in '76, you giving a little white boy, 17-year-old for his first conviction, or anybody for that matter? But can you imagine that happened? So I knew I was being targeted, and 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 that hatred and that rebellion in me from that time, knowing what his intent was, I went to Angola with that attitude. And when I got up there in Angola, it was my intent to be the worst 17-year-old that Angola ever seen. And that was my attitude back then. Anything that stepped in my way, anything that rubbed me the wrong way, I was going to react to it, and I was going to react to it violently. So that was my mindset, you know. So uh, the judge began that mindset. And when I get up there and I see the prison system how it was, I knew that that one way or another I was gonna survive it. I wasn't gonna survive at all. And I think that was my attitude when I first got to Angola.
Now, there's correctional officers, other inmates. The In Connecticut, where I was in prison, and it's basically, from what I gathered, the same everywhere. They tout that they're going to enforce rules in a firm, fair, and consistent manner. They're going to provide opportunities and yada yada. So there's an abundance of rules in prison. In the prison you were in, did the officers fairly enforce the rules?
Listen, when I got to Angola, the you could count the first of all, you could count the black officers that worked in Angola on one hand. There wasn't many black correctional. And second of all, that was the problem. The white officers were racist. The N word was frankly used every day, all day. And they were some of the most corrupt officers that you ever want to meet in life because they were part of the problem. The problem in Angola back then was the fact that uh, the culture at that time was corruption, and the culture up there was violence, sexual exploitation, and everything you can mold together. But the only reason why this happened was because the correction officer was uh willing participant willing participant or rotten participant. You take your pick. And nothing goes on at that time without security active physical participation. Nothing goes on in Angola at that time without the participation of security system. So I don't care if it was violence, drugs, rape, you name it. Uh, Security was part of the problem. It's not the main problem. You're gonna get a lot of bunch of ignorant inmates uh living in a culture of drugs and living in a culture of rape and youngsters and doing all kind of stuff. But that happened only because security allowed it to happen. That was how security controlled the whole prison system by allowing this to go on.
So when you get in there, did anybody, how we would say, try you when you
Oh,
entered the prison
I
system?
was listen. You gotta understand. I was a 17-year-old handsome young guy, and the fact is that everybody gonna get tried one time or another. Is how you react to it. Is what gonna define who you are. If you react to it with peace and loving our brother and all that, you'll never survive. You gotta react to it in a violent way. And you and I reacted in a violent way. And I ain't never stopped everything that was intended for me in a disrespectful way, directly or indirectly. I reacted in a violent way. That was the law of the land. If you don't react to it in a violent way, if you don't jug him or you don't hurt him, then you gonna constantly be that target. So you have to react as the situation require you to act in a violent way. React in a violent way.
So, as a 17-year-old, whether you could fight or not, the staff there have no way of knowing whether you can handle yourself or anything else. So they would have to assume that at 17 you're vulnerable,
Yeah,
and it's their job to protect you. Do
yeah.
they take any measures at all to assure your safety? And if so, what do
No,
they do?
no. Your safety is not a priority. Is not their concern. You're there in Angola. Every man for himself. Once the door closed, you're a man or your mouth. So it wasn't their job to secure your manhood or anything else about you. That wasn't their job to do that. Their job was only to house you, to put you in whatever cell and dormitory you is, and that's it. That's the only thing this job consists of, the house you. Wherever you go, in the cell block or in the dormitory, their job only was to house you, not to secure your life, secure your dignity or pride or anything. That wasn't what security was based on back then in the 70s. It was just security mindset was is to come house you, whatever go on in there, let it go on in there. If a security walked to a dormitory and cell block and found you dead, they just remove your body, send it to the infirmary, and replace that cell, replace that bed. It wasn't their priorities wasn't based on you them seeing you fighting and jump in the middle of fight and say, hey, stop this fight, stop this knife fight, stop this. No, that wasn't their job. Their job was alien. Their job was just to make sure you when they make a count, that's how many prisoners it is, whether it's in the cell block or in the dormitory. That was their job, was to house you, not to engage or, or stop you from killing each other, stop you from raping each other. That wasn't what their job consisted of back then in that time. It was strictly based on housing you. That's it.
What was the worst staff behavior you ever witnessed?
The worst staff behavior, I was I had caught a charge. I had caught a murder charge while I was in Angola, right? So the worst staff behavior I ever experienced was that after I had caught the murder charge in Angola, uh I was being placed in the cell block, and at that time in the cell block with a cell that was meant for two people to be in, and six and seven, right? And so um this these cells were so crowded out, you know, you couldn't, you had to sleep on the floor, you had to sleep stay sitting up or whatever, because a cell that is meant for two people got six people in it. You could imagine how uncomfortable that was.
Yeah.
But the security that was running the cell block, they had people set up in a cell that was strictly back there for no good. And if the security didn't like you, they put you in that cell and hope bad things happen to you in that cell. Hope you get raped, hope you get stabbed, or whatever. So the worst experience I had is that when I went to the cell block, they had this one security guard. He was a captain, and he didn't like the fact that a young me was as brave as I was, and as creating as much trouble as I have. He decided to always put me in the worst cell that he think, well, I was gonna get gang raped or get jugged up in the cell or something like that. He always every time put me in a cell. He put me in a cell with five other guys that he figured was gonna mess over me in the cell. And when that don't happen, he'll take me out of that cell and he'll put me in another cell. And when it don't happen that cell, he pissed off. Now he don't understand why uh guys like that is giving me respect and not attacking me, trying to gang rape me, or trying to do something bad to me. He couldn't understand that. And what he didn't understand was the fact that uh, after I got the charge, the murder charge up there in Angola, that I don't care how bad you is, none of them guys wanted to deal with that type of situation. But they understood what type of youngster they was dealing with, and they wasn't gonna live in peace. So, as many cells as he put me in to try to get me misused and abused, it never happened. And I used to pride myself in the fact is seeing him enraged because what he expected to happen never happened. He never confronted me directly. He was he even him himself, he was scared to approach me man to man, face to face. Uh, uh, but he already tried to put me in some situation that and wish me the worst. But he'll never tell me anything verbally, face to face to myself like I see him do other youngsters or I see him do other people. He never talked to me directly. He always just tried to institute uh, or put me somewhere where hopefully I'll get messed over. And when that never happened, um, me and him had a distant hate for each other from a distance. He never told me nothing. I never told him. I know what his intent was toward me, and he know if he slipped any kind of way around me, I'm gonna be on him just like I be on another prisoner. And so he was scared to come approach me physically, but he always do things to see that I try to get messed over. And until I left from around him, that was his whole scheme mode with to see me messed over somewhere in a cell where he put me in a cell with five other dudes these dudes are pretty most like grown up. They're not youngsters they're not my age, they're grown up. Every last one of them was grown up. Every cell he put me in was grown ups. But the respect, the respect that that taking the life of a human being up there gave you caution a lot of people not to that what you're dealing with. You're dealing with something, so and I think he didn't he didn't understand that a lot of uh the guys he would put me in the cell with respected the fact that I held my own and I continue to hold my own. And I don't think he understood that. In fact, I don't think he ever understood that. But that was the unwritten code that a lot of people he would put me in the cell with. They respected the fact they heard about how I was. They heard about the killing and the knife plays I was doing. They heard about all that, and they know they wasn't dealing with just no weak person or no anybody. So, and then another thing is that knives was very frequently you had to go to, you had to be connected to have a knife even in the dungeon, even on lockdown. So even though I was in there, I had a knife too. I'm more than sure they had a knife. So being in the dungeon don't never uh deny you access to a knife. You could go in the dungeon with a knife. You see, so um and I'm more than sure they had a knife and they know I had a knife. So where we gonna go from there? We gonna jug each other up in the cell, and not everybody you have in this 5, 6 man. You had six of us in these cells. Not everybody. Even if you have the three as low down as ones in there, everybody ain't gonna be as low down in there. everybody don't feel like they ain't gonna allow nobody to use him like that. They know he was using up a lot of black prisoners to do a lot of dangerous shit, but everybody would not allow themselves to be used like that. Especially when it came to somebody like me who was becoming well known in the penitentiary for the violent acts that I was committing to maintain myself as a man, to maintain my respect. And a lot of things that I was doing was I was developing that reputation like that. And a lot of the guys he was putting me in a cell with, they understood exactly what they was up against when dealing with me, even at 17, 18 years old. You know,
What were the circumstances that led to the murder that you committed in there?
like I say, when disrespect happens, you gotta react with disrespect. Here's a guy that here's a guy that decided that he wanted to try and see that he can disrespect me totally, that he could come at me totally. Not mind you the fact that I had already busted him in the head with a window crank, an iron window crank, and he had to go to the infirmary and get 16 stitches in the head. Remind me when you go, even when you do somebody something like that, they go to the infirmary, come back, you still gotta live in the same dormitory with that person. And I knew that me and him could not live in the same dormitory together. So I told him that we can't live in the same dormitory together. Either you go or you telling people it's time to leave. He told me no, I gotta go. I said, well, okay, we gonna leave it at that. We gonna see which one go. And I said, since you disrespect me, you can never live in this cell. You can never live in this dormitory. And I'm gonna show you you ain't gonna live in this dormitory. So I prepared myself to destroy him. Since he figured he could live in the dormitory after disrespecting me, I'm gonna show him he can't. He can't live in the dorm with me after disrespecting me, after calling me out my name, after calling me a little bitch, after calling me I need me a man and all that shit. I'm gonna show you you can never live in the dormitory with me under any circumstance. So so when we was walking the child prepared to take him out. I had a phone partner at the time that I didn't want him to get involved, but I knew there's nothing I could have prevent him from doing it. So when I made my move on him to commence jigging him up, and my phone partner just came out of the crowd out of nowhere. Now we on the wall. You got thousands of inmates on the wall watching this. This happened on the big yard on the wall. And you see 1,000 inmates, got hundreds of inmates on the wall while we gone. So we did the deed, walked off and gone. And when we walked off, security came down there and found found him the way he was and corralled us and brought us to the dungeon with the knives in our hand. And we went to the dungeon with the knives in our hand. Once we was in the cell, we gave him the knives up, because at that time in Angola, you don't guilt somebody up and then get your knife up with all the inmates around because his boys or whoever his boss was would catch you if you get your knife up on a walk and they walking you to the dungeon, the security ain't gonna stop another inmate from coming out there jigging you up. And you engage your knife up. You engage your knife up as you walking down the walk with security. And I seen this happen before. You walking down, you walk with security, and you engage security, your knife, and the dude partners come up and go to jigging you, and security gonna back up. All right, sure they're gonna arrest them too, but Have you not given your knife up, you wouldn't they wouldn't have attacked you. They had to think about their own life. And I've seen that happen before where a guy juked another guy up on the wall and he gave his and when security came, he gave his knife up to security and they walked him back to the dungeon. And when they walked him back to the dungeon, the, the guy partners, two of the guy partners ran up on him and jigged him up, but you had no knife. And security didn't stop them from it, like I said, it wasn't their job to protect you. It was their job to house you. But they ain't gonna put their life on the line for you getting jugged up by two inmates. So you got jugged up and whatever. You just survive, you survive. You don't, that's the price you pay for giving your knife up. So we understood that situation. So when we didn't give our knives up, we walked down the walk to the dungeon with the knives in our hand, and then we didn't give them up until they put us in our individual cells.
So I just for anybody that doesn't know, when you're saying jug them up, you're talking about stabbing. In the dungeon is what people would call the hole and
Oh,
segregation, right?
the whole,
Okay, so you first have the altercation with this guy, then they
yeah,
put him right back into the dorm with you,
dormitory, yeah. Well,
and staff is doing nothing to prevent this altercation from escalating.
listen, they didn't do. If you wanted to do something as a security, you could have done something when the first altercation happened. When I beat him with the iron crank and he went got stitches in his head. That's if you wanted to do anything, he went to the infirmary and stayed in the infirmary 2, 3 days. So he come back. If you wanted to do anything, that was the time to do anything, right? Okay, that was the time for you to do something. If your job was to secure and prevent any trouble, that was your time to do something. However, you gotta look at the way Angola was made at that time is that once you is put in the dormitory and the doors is closed, ain't no security in there for protect your life. Ain't no security in it. See, nowadays in Angola, you got security walk around the dormitory 24/7, right? But back then there was no security in those dormitories. So once the door closed, your your life is in your own hand. You know, that's just the way it was. That's just how things happen. So uh him going to the infirmary coming right back, that's normal. That's normal. The only one could have checked him out or took him out of that dormitory is himself. He had to go to security and say, look, I don't want to live in there with this guy. I don't want to stay in there. Take me out, put me in another dime. He the only one could just security ain't gonna do that. He the only one could have saved his own self by going to security. But foolish pride and his machoism and his whatever egotistic he was on wouldn't allow him to run from a 17-year-old kid. You see, so he could have removed himself from that dime, but he chose not to. Maybe because I was young, maybe because he feel he believed that he could still bully me or whatever. Whatever his mindset was, that it ultimately paid he paid the ultimate price for his his behavior, his thinking. He paid a hell of a price. But the fact remained that security is never was in security mind to remove him of me unless we request it. That's it. If you don't request it, you go in there and live, either get along or kill each other and die or whatever. That was security stance at that time. They they didn't involve themselves for putting their life on the line to protect no prisoner. You know, they didn't do
Yeah.
that at that time.
So at some point, though, you get involved as a boxing trainer. When and how does that happen?
Well, as years go on, as years I was growing up in prison, you know. So I when I caught the murder charge in Angola, I went stayed on maximum security lockdown for the next 4 or 5 years. When I come out of that, I was a big old youngster, and when I was in CCR, uh, I met the the most the most what I'm saying, prisoners that were physically damaged to themselves and others. That's what you go to CCR for. And I was up there with Black Panthers and Muslims and so on. You know, they was the more radical. I was up there with the Angola tree, you know, and pretty much all the most radical elements of in Angola at that time, especially in the Angola tree, with Wood Fox and Herman Wallace and King. I was up there with some of the more militant and radical prisoners you ever want meet in Angola at the time. So I practically grew up under that setting there because I was 17 years old and I came from up there at like 20, 21 years old. So I stayed up there for a minute. But my maturity, my mindset had shifted, you know, from from trying to be this angry young white dude to rebellion and everything, and add a lot of purpose to a lot of things that was going on. I wasn't gonna pick no cotton. I wasn't gonna do no sugar cane. I wasn't gonna do all that. The only time I ever seen cotton is when I watched a movie one time when I was young with Cicely Tyson playing in a movie called Sundance. And the only that's my only graphic idea about picking cotton was white men standing on the halls with shotguns with a lot of slaves. That was in the movie Sun. And when it was my first time actually going in the work environment in Angola. And the only thing you see is white men standing on horses with a lot of prisoners picking cotton and doing sugar cane and all that. And instantly, my rebellion against that was so gross. It's so outrageous. It's like, you know, I'm from New Orleans. I never seen a cotton stalk. I never seen a sugar cane. So when I come back out of a lockdown, these are the images in sight I'm seeing, and I'm like so grossly rebellious against it. I say I never pick cotton. I never do sugar cane, and whatever buck that gonna happen, I'm a buck against every last one of them. So I came out with the attitude, and when I come out there with that attitude, I want to lead guys to buck, mean rebel, buck against picking cotton, buck against uh being treated like a slave, buck against somebody calling you the N word all day and every day like you're a slave. That I went to rebelling against this, and I want to cause the disturbance of whole phone line was bucking and was sitting down and not because they're heavy in the heat and sun and, and a lot of uh a lot of things when you in that hot sun and picking cotton and all that there, people telling you uh, inmates going up there to the water cooler and ran out of water, so they got to wait on water. So I see, well, if you got to wait on water, they got to wait on work too. Sit down, don't do no work. But each time I wind up on lockdown. So on lockdown, that's when I was doing a lot of fighting, doing a lot of practice of fighting. So as I was growing up in Angola, I went to doing, I knew I'd never go in the phone line. I knew I'd never go. So I had to do something else. So what I started doing, engaging in programs that would positive my mind, but never go to the phone line. Cause I ain't gonna be nobody's slave. I ain't never going to the phone line. So what happened was I went to engaging in programs that would enhance my education and stuff like that. And eventually, as I grew up in older in Angola, they shift me out of Angola and they shift me to DCI, Dixon Corrections, to, and I started involving myself with youngsters in boxing. So as I went to training a lot of youngsters in Dixon Corrections too, I dedicated myself to them. I'll say I will go either make you a man or make you a champion. That was my motto. I'm gonna either make you a man or make you a champion. And successfully, one of my most successful careers was as a trainer in DCI because out of the whole DOC, the whole body of DOC, DCI was the most dominant boxing team in the history of DOC because pretty much every youngster that I trained in DCI became a very great fighter. Uh, and through the years of them dominating year after year after year after year. Even Angola, I told Angola boxing team when they shift me out there that becoming a trainer at DCI, long as I'm at DCI, Angola never win a banner. I never win a team banner. And long as I was a trainer at DCI, Angola, nobody else ever won a team banner. And DCI became the most dominant boxing team in the history of DOC. And the fact that I really did never want to go to the winter banner, and I succeeded at that. They never won a banner. They, at the end of the year, we tallied the points of who had the most belts and who had the most points for those belts. DCI came up on top every year, every year. You could consider DCI boxing team the Chicago Bulls or the Lakers or the Boston Celtics. They win year after year after year after year. And that's when a lot of the youngsters I was training, like one of them, Brad Solomon, he had he had um he had went home and he had became the national Golden Guard champion 3 years straight, 05, 06, 07. And he won the Golden Boy Award. In fact, he made history in the Golden Glove as the only fighter in the history of the Golden Glove to ever win a national title and fewer than 30 fights. He done it in 6 fights and never been did before. And at the time I was being released, I had Brad had fought Bernard Hopkins' nephew on ESPN on national television. And a lot of commentators like Roy Jones and so on were commentating on Brad Solomon's style of fight. And and as they were commenting on it, many people were saying he'd fight like Roy, he'd fight like Sugar Ray, but mostly consensus believer that he'd fight a lot like Roy. He do a lot of Roy things. So when Roy met Brad, Roy asked Brad how he evolved his style of fight like that, and Brad told him that uh, that Roy was his trainer when he was trying to favorite fighter. And Roy said like, well, I would like to meet your trainer one day. So it just so happened I went home and Brad, that fight happened in 2010. I went home in 2011 and I was preparing, I had to prepare Brad for a WBA world title, fighting the guy out of Ukraine. But we had went to Roy Jones training camp. And when we went to Roy Jones training camp, me and Roy hit it off immediately. We hit it off immediately. We became the best of friends. And Roy asked me um, Roy asked me, do I want training preparing for a fight in Russia? I say, of course. I mean, you looking at someone that always idolized Roy, consider Roy to be one of the greatest fighters in the history of boxing. And I'm like, of course, I love that, Roy. So the only place I could have got my passport at a record time was in New Orleans. So I had to drive from Pensacola to New Orleans, get my passport, bring my passport back to Roy. Listen, the pretty amazing thing about this is that I came home October the 5th, 2011. I was in Russia November the 2nd, 2011. I wasn't even home 30 days, and I was way across the world in Russia. And you had read a thing about Russia, you had read a things about communism, Bolshevik, and you had read a lot of things about this. And here, me, an ex-convict, was released October the 5th and was in Russia November the 2nd, training one of the greatest fighters in the history of boxing. And I'm like, you can't even dream this shit up like this. So it was one of the most gratifying moments of my life from where I become, from the experience I lived through and go to where that night found me November the 2nd in a five-star hotel in Moscow. That was surreal to me. That was mind-boggling to me. So that's how me and Roy relationship began. And our relationship evolved from that beginning into something greater. So that's how we that's how we started.
So when you were in the lockdown prison, the maximum security after Angola, you mentioned, I think you said Black Panthers. Now, in my experience, the real black militants, I mean, the ones that actually practice it, because I don't know if they had it there, but you got a lot of fakers. But the real ones are incredibly disciplined.
Yeah,
And I
Black Panther.
just, the Black Panthers, Nation of Islam, black
Yeah,
Muslims, black militants are very disciplined.
yeah, that's true.
And I'm curious how your interactions with them helped you to become more disciplined in your life and get away from the getting
Yeah.
into trouble.
Well, that pretty much, uh, like one of them, like Herman Wallace was one of the Angola Tree Brothers, and him and Woodfire. But I was mostly influenced by Herman Wallace because uh, he taught him and King. They taught me so many things. Look, they put me on the side as a youngster. They understood who I was. They've been heard about the reputation I had developed. And they told me y'all the young black dudes would become to admire and respect me for my action. But they made me see that don't don't take that love and respect that these youngsters giving you and guide it in a way that towards the negative, right? So that was the Black Panther influence on me that made me stop doing reckless things and be conscious of the fact that a lot of younger brothers were looking up to me as a shining light, as that light, that something that they needed to see. Not only somebody stand up to the system, stand up to the corruption of the security, but survive it survive it and make the system respect them and make the security respect them and make the corrupt prisoners respect them. They seen all that in me, but some of the some of the Black Panthers that was up there and those Muslims that had rioted in Baton Rouge way back in the game, I think in the early 70s, around 71 and 72. Well, all those guys was up there and the fact that I was put in that type of environment, these guys were considered dangerous, physically dangerous to themselves and others, but these was highly intelligent people, and they seemed to the the Panther seen the recklessness of my behavior and was able to influence me to modify my ideas and how I was looking at the system and how I was looking at individuals. I stopped looking at individuals to pray and start looking at individuals to lead, to be to be to be myself, but also not be negative. And I think that was that Black Panther influence that early influenced me to start being intellect. I start thinking my way through the system rather than trying to be a violent problem. Just try to think my way through the situation, try to uh, uh, be a leader in situation. And I think those guys up there like Herman Wallace. In fact, Herman taught me how to play chess. I mean, he gave me uh, my first book to read and when he gave me a book to read, and that was like a 300-page book I never forget. Um, he said, if you could complete reading this book, if you could read this book and complete this book, then I have I have a gift for you. It- So I was curious because me and him were playing chess every day, and I completed reading the book, and the book was the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I completed reading the book, and the gift he gave me was my own personal chessboard, a brand new chessboard, a brand new chess. He gave me my brand new chessboard from completing reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I completed it. So um, my my way of thinking around these dudes was so different, but I know I had to deal with the situation in Angola when they come let me from out of CCR and let me back in Angola. I got to go deal with a lot of negative shit that was going on in the population, and I kept asking myself, would I stand strong? Would I continue to be, a conscious person? Would I continue to be a conscious person and not fall back into the ways of destruction? Would I continue this route? Fortunately for me, I did. And that's why I'm here today. Because you remember I I was given 40 years to go to prison. I received 35 years in prison, a total of 75 years. But here I stand today as a free man, so you can say that influence did that early influence with the Black Panther parties and all that, it did modify my thinking and my behavior to an extent that I was able to think my way through the system or be a leader or stop. And when I begin to be a leader, then that's when things changed. That's when I was more engaged in a lot of personal growth and uh, personal things to remove myself from the situation of prison. That's when I began to think that way.
I had a friend named Ali, older Muslim guy. Now, in the prison that I was in, it wasn't racially divided. I guess a lot of places have been. This place wasn't. And, the people that I was attracted to were the other people that read, were into learning, and we would argue and debate. But Ali, one time, he was sitting at the table at lunch with three other black kids or three black dudes, and he got up and he stopped sitting there. And because Ali told me the story, what happened, and one of the guys said to him and said, brother Ali, why'd you stop sitting at the table? And Ali told him, well, you guys keep throwing around the N word at that table. Now I know that doesn't refer to me, so I have no business sitting at that table.
Mm.
And it just stuff like that are powerful experiences
You
because
better be.
those young guys are looking up to him like you're talking about these youngsters looking up to you. It's
Yeah.
like I can't remember the author of the book. Oh God, I can't remember the name of the book. I'm losing it. But he talked about in the book, it was a guy in Philly, and he talked about in black culture there used to be something they would call old heads. And the old heads were the role models in the neighborhood. And he said it was Code of the Streets was the name of the book. And he talked about how that is now missing. But that's what it reminds me of when you're talking. People have said to me, and I want to ask you about this. People say to me, Mike, you criticize the prison system and you say they don't offer opportunities for rehabilitation, for change. But then how do you explain how you changed? And I said, well, I happen to be fortunate that I had a cellmate for 11 years that was into changing with me. And we read books together and talked about them together. That's nothing that the DOC did. And I'm just curious if that's your experience as well, where your personal transformation happened to be because you came across some guys that took an interest in helping you and wasn't because of what the DOC did.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't give. Listen, when first of all, the change you gotta want it. I don't care how many opportunities, even today, that the system gives you, you gotta want it to even go get it. What is you willing to go to what it take to go do that to get it? Now, um, me myself personally, my own personal growth, I for I give credit to the early influence because you have to influence me early on, not later on, but early on. So a lot of initiative I took was strictly motivated on from my early influence, strictly from education and everything. Um, and I think on the early influence that I received from a lot of those Black Panthers and so on, I wanted to be smart like those guys. Those guys were really goddamn smart, and those guys were deep. And I really wanted to. I really wanted to be like those guys. I wanted to be able to interpret myself. I want to be able to see what they see. So, in order to be like them, you had to seek out knowledge. You had to be self motivated to go in that direction and see, because that influence that I received, I think when I look back on my life, the most crystal that opened the thing in my mind was at 17, 18 years old when I was around those guys. Let's look at it this way. Let's say I would have never went around those guys and I would have stayed up in the madness of Angola. Where the hell you think I would have been? I would have been queuing up dead bodies. I would have been completely wiped off the face of the earth. So going up there by those guys really and it leads to me that later on in my life bust open and made me really want to be smart like those guys, to read like those guys, to study like those guys. And that's what I began to do. It ain't nothing that the system did that and put me in no opportunity to say, look, you go get your education. Look, you go get, you study this, you study that. The system not going to tell you that. They're not going to tell you, uh, look, we created this program. You must, you must do that. It's mandatory that you do that. It's mandatory that you go get your education. It's mandatory that you do this. No, the system not going to do that. They're not going to create no. A lot of the programs in prison is created by other prisons. First of all, if they got uh government sponsored program that highlight out. In later years, some of them programs begin to pop up where you have these faith-based programs and so on and so forth. But a lot of the programs that for education and teaching of prisoners is really created by prisoners. who had redeemed themselves to the fact that, why I want to start this literacy program. And do the system support that? Yes, it does. But a lot of those programs is started by prisoners for prisoners. And if you is not self motivated to go to them, then okay, well, but see me personally, myself, uh, I give myself motivation and influence in my life all the credit for the transformation that I became because the system didn't allow me to grow as I grew if I stayed part of. I had to step outside the system. I had to step outside. My mind had to go be free in order for me to progress and make myself into the man I became or wanted to become. I had to do that within me, and I had to do that not about what the system had to offer. I had to go beyond that. If you just go by what the system had to offer, you're not going very far. You did. You had to go beyond that, and people like us go beyond that because we've been and reached a level of awareness that we see things. We see things and we critical a lot of things that's going on around us, and we don't want to be part of. So you got to step outside that what they offer and go beyond that by what you want to achieve or what level of education you want to make. And I think uh, even though I took advantage of a lot of opportunities when I was in DCI because I graduated out of electronics. I got my FCC license. Uh, I took postgraduate study in fiber optic and copper cable. I went to LSU and took my E plus certification and all that. I did all of the things, and I think even that um, was all self driven. But the fact that those opportunities was there, Angola and DCI is two different places. DCI is a satellite. You might find no opportunities in DCI, but you ain't gonna find no opportunities like that in Angola. DCI was comprised of a very young population, and you dealing with people very young who coming into the system. So the opportunities you will find as far as self growth, you may find that at a satellite, but you're definitely not going to find in a maximum security prison like Angola.
What's your life like today?
My life like today, I'm still doing what I do. I'm still training fighters. I train. My gym is located on the West Bank in Harvey, Louisiana, Uppercut Boxing Club. I still train national champion pro fighters. In fact, one of my pro fighters have a fight May 22nd in Las Vegas on the zone. And I still communicate with Roy, my forever brother. And I'm still pretty much dealing with youngsters with the art of boxing and maybe um, changing them, dealing with the youngsters today in the free world in the streets is been one of my greatest blessings because that's what I love to do. And that's what my life consists of today. Training youngsters every day, girls and boys every day, so that pretty much what my life is still.
That's awesome. Okay, where can people find you on social media and that sort of thing?
Well, I'm under my name on Facebook, Barry's Cooper. That's I'm that's on Facebook. Under social media, I'm Conderman Whop on Instagram. So Conderman Whop on Instagram. My name, Valrice Cooper, under Facebook. And um and personally in the New Orleans area is the fact that my gym is at 2010 Woodmill Boulevard in Harvey, Louisiana. But you can you're gonna see me more in the gym than out the gym. So that's where I'm presently located.
Awesome. Valrice, thank you so much for this interview. This has been awesome. You've got a great story, and congratulations, man. You're
Thank you,
an
man.
inspiration, brother.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, man. Me and you are of the same mind, man. We've been to the Dragons Den, all right? But
Yes, sir. Don't go anywhere. I'm gonna when I want to talk to you after the show, so don't hang up.
all right.
Everybody, I hope everybody's enjoyed this interview. I know I have. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Valrice.
Thank you. You're well.
Free audio post production by alphonic.com.